Well, the PS5 Pro is officially here, and I've got to say I was excited for this console, but I'm kind of a bit disappointed after I got to know the reality of how the games are going to be running at 60 FPS. It's not what I expected, but nonetheless, it's still a better console than the PS5. So apparently all the reviews have just dropped in, and IGN has done some pretty good review this year, and I've been seeing a lot of people speaking about the IGN reviews, and it just seems like IGN has really done some in-depth, detailed reviews on the PS5 Pro. So I think it's going to be a good one that we're going to be analyzing it, and as you can see, they've even done some thermal testing to see what the temperatures of each PS5 and PS5 Pro is going to work like. So all of these in-depth skilled testing is being officially done, and today is the final day when you're going to learn about what's good about the PS5 and what's actually terrible, and something that Sony was not really revealing to the fullest, which we're going to talk about in this video before you go ahead and decide to purchase that PS5 Pro. Now, first off, the question comes down to who this console is basically targeted to. Like, what are the type of gamers that are going to be purchasing this console? Is it the average gamer, professional gamer, or streamers or YouTubers and stuff like that? Are they the ones that really need to get this? Or maybe if you're an average gamer and if you just want to have a good, nice experience with gaming, is this the right console to get? That's the biggest question of all time, because in the beginning, I actually thought that the PlayStation 5 Pro was going to be able to run at 60 frames per second, and it was going to be the same as the fidelity mode on the PS5 version. But it turns out that there is actually a bit more gimmick that was hidden from the marketing of the PS5 Pro, but later on I now finally understood that it's not actually what we think, and there's a lot more to understand here about the performance of the PS5 Pro and how it's going to be delivering the 60 frames per second, and what are the things that we actually need to trade off in order to be able to play at fidelity mode at 60 frames per second rather than choosing the 30 FPS mode, which is once again also present in the PS5 console, except for a very few games that have completely eliminated the option of having like the fidelity mode. But most of the game, they still have 30 FPS mode, and I will tell you what the difference is, and it's not what we have been expecting so far. Now, the first thing I noticed that when the PS5 Pro was announced, and recently just a couple weeks ago, one of my close friends who was actually wanting to buy a PlayStation 5, and he was asking me about the PS5 Pro and what are the differences between the PS5, the base versions, and he was asking me if he should go for the PS5 Pro version or the PS5 Slim. And after I gave him a brief explanation of what the difference is all about and what kind of major differences he's going to be seeing with gaming performances and visuals and all that stuff, the one thing that I noticed is that average gamers, they really don't care about how the game's graphics and fidelities are going to be slightly crisper or sharper images, or ray tracing is going to give you like a better lighting, slightly different than the base version. So an average gamer just wants to play games, chill around, have fun. They really don't care about all of this stuff. And in the beginning, me being a skeptical gamer myself, I like to see all the details added in. I'm just someone who can't take the fact that there is actually a better version of this particular game that is currently available, and I don't have it. I'm just playing it on a version that's not really the highest looking or better looking version than what already exists. It kind of just, it's something that nitpicks me, and I just can't feel satisfied for some reason. But yeah, it is just what it is with me. I just personally cannot take the fact that some parts of the games are actually better on another console, because I've been used to playing games on the PC versions, and I just love playing games on the highest ultra maxed out settings. And ever since I made the move to the console generations, this is like the maximum limit as to how much the console can achieve. So it kind of just made me a bit more satisfied that all the players are playing the same game and the same visual. So that's kind of satisfying, trust me, for some people like myself. But yeah, when I heard about the PS5 Pro and I heard that there's going to be some very slight upgrades to the visual, to me as a content creator and for someone that just nitpicks on all the details, it kind of felt worth it. But at the same time, $700 of a price point for a very slight changes was definitely not worth it. For a guy like myself, I still did not decide to go ahead and buy the PS5 Pro because I just think it's not worth it at all at this point. Up until Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, I'm not going to be buying this console whatever. What new games Sony is going to be bringing out that's going to make this console worth it. Now, another thing that I noticed is that when my friend actually got the PS5 Slim version, for some reason he never really cared about the visuals. It was just all about getting to play the games, have fun anytime he goes out for work, and after he's done with work, he just wants to chill, play games, and have fun, and that's pretty much it. And I just figured that 90 90% of gamers out there just think the same way, and nobody wants to have like the best visuals. They're not nitpickers. They're not like hardcore gamers, basically. So the targeted audience or for this console is only going to be nitpickers like myself and some people who just cannot stand the fact that there is a better version of the same game that you're playing, and it just kind of, you know, irritates you from inside, wanting to go ahead and experience the best version of the game that's available. So now that it seems like IGN has come up with some really good reviews so far, and a lot of people have been talking about this review lately, and they've said that it's actually pretty good. So let's just go ahead and take a look at what IGN has to say about the new PlayStation 5 Pro. No, actually, it looks pretty good, to be honest.
The PlayStation 5 Pro seems like it should be more exciting than it actually is. It's without question the most powerful console you can buy right now, and the enhanced games I've been able to play ahead of launch do look great and run much more smoothly than the standard PS5 can handle, thanks to some upgraded hardware and impressive upscaling tech. But it's also completely unsurprising that the faster PS5 is, well, faster, and it's also more expensive. Considering that the original PS5 can still provide enough power to run games competently in 2024, spending $700 means you have to really want the best of the best from your games to make the Pro a worthy investment.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. Like, if you're paying $700 for this console, I think it's just going to give you like the best version possible. That's exactly what you're paying for. It's not like it's a console that's going to change like a generational thing. It's just like, you know, you're getting the best version of the game. That's it. It's not even like a huge difference. And I think the PS5 Pro's worth is actually going to be tested when GTA 6 comes out in fall of 2025. And at this point, you know, Rockstar Games have already confirmed that the dates are not changed. So I'm very intrigued to see what the PS5 Pro is going to be performing. And if it cannot do 60 FPS for whatever reason, then I think this console is basically useless, and it's better to wait for the PS6 rather than, you know, wasting our time on the PS5 Pro. So that's like the one thing that I really wanted to go ahead and check out.
Be ready to shell out an extra $80 for a Blu-ray disc drive to install yourself. If you feel like Sony is trying to nickel and dime you on top of the $700 price tag, I'm not going to argue against you. Physically, it's a pretty sleek console relative to the enormous launch.
It actually looks pretty good, honestly. They've given like a curved thing in the black, you know, texture. Like there's like a shiny black texture. There's the OG PS5, the disc version, and like the non-disc digital version. But then they have like a sleek look, honestly. It's much more thin, and the height is the same as the OG PS5, and it kind of just makes it look a console that you could carry anywhere, I guess. But yeah, I don't like the fact that, you know, they're selling all of these disc variants and like the stand, you know, completely separately. I don't think that was a necessary move. It's just one of the most money-grabbing moves that I've ever seen, man. This is like worst of all.
It largely takes after the design principles of the Slim model. The only major difference is that it's taller when standing vertical, which is accounted for by the fins in the middle that create a cross-section on the console. It helps make room for the more robust internal components, but doesn't add much bulk to the existing design. It's also not noticeably louder than the original PS5, so you don't need to worry about it sounding like a jet engine.
Oh, wait a second. I don't think the original PS5 sounds like a jet engine. I have the original PS5, the one that released. It never made noise so far, and the fans are even dustier than I've, you know, ever recall. Like, it's been months cleaned up my PS5. It does pretty good. It holds up pretty good, and I don't think it makes any sort of jet noises. And I've even played games like Red Dead Redemption 2, The Last of Us Part 2, and even with all the dust collected, it never once made jet engine noises. And that was like the issue that I had with PS4 Pro, but not with the base PS5 as well. But then I don't know what he's talking about, but it seems like some people might be having issues with the noise. Let me know in the comments. Did you guys have any noise with the PS5, the base version? I don't think there was any.
As far as thermals go, the PS5 Pro runs roughly the same temperature as the base PS5 under load, hovering around 35 to 40 degrees Celsius from the rear exhaust, based on our thermal imaging tests.
Yeah, this is actually pretty good. Like, if you compare this to a PC version, I'm running like an RTX 3090 GPU, and any game that I try to max out or even run at the same settings as the PS5, my GPU and the CPU, it actually needs much better cooling system, and that costs a lot of money. Eventually, you know, the PlayStation, the components, you know, Sony or Microsoft with Xbox or whatever, the consoles are much more easier when it comes to cooling system. It's one thing that you personally don't have to worry about your console getting overheated, because the company that made it, they already tested things out and they know what is best for what game, and you for sure know that it's not going to be changing. So that's like one thing that you can definitely be confident with the console. So it's not really a big fact like you need to worry about like thermal scaling and like
it's a bit striking how
stuff.
little has changed from the original PS5 on the spec sheet. The Pro comes with a 2TB NVMe SSD, which is twice as large but the same speed as the original Super.
I think like the SSD upgrade was like much needed for most of the guys, but for me personally, I still, you know, kind of rocked with the base 825 gigs, and still with 825 gigs, I still have like a lot of space left because I usually just play 2 to 3 games at like one time. So I'm not someone like who just keeps switching games, but I do understand some people do just love to, you know, bombard their library with a bunch of games downloaded.
That addresses one of the main complaints about the launch PS5, which is that 1TB goes very quickly when you're installing games that take upwards of 100 GB at a time.
Like Call of Duty, for example, like Call of Duty, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto. I don't think GTA is like that big of a game. I think it's like 160 gigs. But yeah, there isn't really like much updates like what Call of Duty does. But yeah, I don't think, you know, 2 TB was necessary, but let me know in the comments. Maybe that's probably why the pricing was like super high up. And I don't think like there was a necessary need for like 2 TB version. They could probably just give us like a 500 gigs or 1 TB or 2 TB. Like the options could have been there. And if there were options, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people could have purchased this console by just getting the 500 gigs version and making the price or the overall price be much lesser than $700.
For context, an extra 1TB in the form of an aftermarket SSD would run you around $100 if you want the same storage for a base PS5, which sweetens the deal when looking at the price difference between the PS5 and PS5 Pro. The big upgrade though is in the GPU, rated at 16.7 teraflops, which is a sizable jump on paper from the 10.3 teraflops of the original PS5. Sony says the Pro packs 67% more compute units and onboard memory that's 28% faster, PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR. Much like NVIDIA's DLSS, this is Sony and AMD's AI-driven upscaling technology that uses machine learning to construct images that can appear with a quality close to full 4K resolution without having to stress the system's hardware to generate that detail through raw processing power. Granted, it won't be exactly the same as native 4K since it's scaling from a lower base resolution, but it doesn't have to since you're not going to be putting it side by side with the real thing, and the vast majority of people aren't going to be able to tell the difference in most cases, especially while they're enjoying the higher frame rates and visual effects this technique allows.
Exactly, right? Like most of the people are not going to be able to see like difference. Like honestly, I can't even tell difference between a 4K monitor, the 1440p monitor. Like the 2K and 4K looks pretty similar. So comparing from that, you know, you never really know. Like there isn't really going to be like much huge of a difference. The only difference that I would honestly notice visually is either if there's going to be ray tracing turned on or off. And if there's like better ray tracing that's available, then that's what makes this console a whole lot better. But there is a gimmick actually with the PS5 Pro version, because the 60 frames per second, that as far as what I've heard, the 60 frames per second is only going to be available is with ray tracing feature kind of like slowed down a bit on like the fidelity mode running at 60 FPS. But then there's also another full-on fidelity mode which turns on the ray tracing and gives you like full-fledged ray tracing, and that actually runs the game at 30 FPS even on the PS5 Pro. So it's not what we think. The ray tracing is kind of, you know, slower down a little bit with the 60 frames per second mode that, you know, Sony was marketing eventually. So that's kind of disappointing.
It's nice to see Sony is moving away from chasing raw computing power as the end-all be-all of console tech, and as upscaling continues to advance, so too will its implementation in games. As you'll see in our performance breakdown, PSSR is one of the major keys in creating parity between quality and performance options. It also opens the door for games to explore ray tracing techniques to a greater extent, although mileage will vary based on every game's PS5 Pro specific updates, where developers will choose to prioritize different aspects of their respective games. So the PS5 Pro is a bit more complex than simply having one uncompromised Pro enhanced mode. Developers room to be experimental in pushing boundaries, especially with ray tracing, because it packs enough power to hit higher frame rates without sacrificing as much graphical fidelity. There's still
you see everybody that does the review for the PS5 Pro, they make sure that they're saying a difference, but at the same time, just watch what he says, all right? Let me just replay it.
Without sacrificing as much graphical fidelity.
Without sacrificing as much graphical fidelity. So he did not say that it's not going to be like completely no sacrifice at all. Every single reviewers that I've seen so far, they make sure to mention this as much, which means that there is definitely going to be differences. There is going to be some sort of, downscale, and the downscale comes down to ray tracing, and that's what I finally found out. And ray tracing is going to be downscaled. It's kind of like the same when it comes to like visuals and textures with the fidelity mode, but apart from that, ray tracing and lighting, it's kind of going to be downscaled. So that's one of the biggest downfalls of
There's
the PS5
still some
Pro.
level of compromise to be made though, so if you were hoping that the Pro would take out all the FOMO stress out of selecting between 60 FPS performance or 30 FPS fidelity modes, well, in some games, now there are even more modes to choose from. Alternatively, if you love having that control over how your games run, that's great news. In my experience though, the visual gap between these modes is much smaller than it is on a base PS5, often making the Pro's performance-centric modes the clear choice. Let's start with a marquee PlayStation first-party game, Marvel's Spider-Man 2.
All right, here we go. So they're comparing the base PS5 is on the left side, the base PS5's fidelity mode, which comes with ray tracing turned on, and like the highest graphics settings that's possibly available on the PS5. So it's like the base version on the left side, and the right side is like the Fidelity Pro mode, which means that it's the same as the fidelity mode that's available on the PS5, and it's the same mode on the PS5 Pro. So let's see if the frame rates are going to be the same with both the consoles.
On PS5 Pro, you get to choose between Fidelity Pro and Performance Pro modes. The latter offers visual quality that's identical to the base PS5's Fidelity mode, with all the original ray tracing features intact while maintaining a smooth 60 FPS. Effectively, the best of both worlds when compared to the PS5's modes. However, with the Fidelity Pro option, Insomniac cranked the knobs even further, putting features like ray-traced ambient occlusion, key light shadows, and further improved reflections on the table. But all those upgrades come at the cost again of being chained down to 30 FPS.
Exactly. You see, like if you want to see like ray tracing more turned on, it's just like the first party developer thing. They kind of like cranked up very, very minor ray tracing abilities for the PS5 Pro. And that's basically because, Sony wants to sell their console, and that's the reason why they did it. But most of the games, 90% of the games, they're not going to do it, right? It's just going to be the same. But if you want to play the game with ray tracing turned on, it's going to still run at 30 FPS. So if you want to, make it kind of similar to what the base fidelity version looks like on the PS5, you can run it, however, on the 60 FPS mode with the performance fidelity mode. So there's like two modes now that's added into the PS5 version, if you know what I mean. The first mode is performance fidelity mode, which runs the same as PS5's fidelity mode, but rather than running at 30 FPS, they now run at 60 FPS at the cost of turning lower or like turning off the ray tracing technology, or like making it look much worse than what it looks like in the fidelity mode. So the ray tracing is kind of a bit more shimmered down. So that's the reason why we're going to be getting the 60 FPS. But if you want to play the game with all the ray tracing turned on, and if the game looks amazing and all that stuff, as good as what the fidelity mode looks like on the PS5, it's still going to run at 30 FPS on the PS5 Pro. So I, honestly speaking, I don't see any worth at all in fact of buying a PS5 Pro at this point. There is literally no actual differences. Like, it's still the exact same, but there's going to be like an option which is going to give you like a slightly shimmered down ray tracing mode, which is going to enable you to have like 60 FPS. I don't think it's that worth it in order to pay $700. But yeah, it's kind of worth it. But if the price is $700, I don't think that's like a huge
some of these settings
benefit.
To squeeze out a few extra frames, but I wasn't able to reach anything near 60 FPS even when turning everything down a notch. Horizon Forbidden West showcases another interesting implementation of PS5 Pro enhancements. It has 3 options: favorite graphics.
You see both left and right, the graphics mode on the PS5 and like the graphics mode on the PS5 Pro. Both of them are running at 30 FPS. Both. And that's because, the graphics mode is turned on the PS5 Pro version with some extra ray tracing. It's not like the same. If you're playing on the performance fidelity mode on the PS5 Pro, the ray tracing compared to the fidelity mode on the PS5 is still not going to be the same. It's kind of going to be a little bit reduced from the fidelity mode on the PS5 in order to achieve the 60 FPS. But still, you're going to have the ray tracing, but it's not going to be like to the ultimate final version or what you're going to be getting with the graphical fidelity mode on the PS5 Pro. So if you switch to the graphical fidelity mode, which is called as the Graphics Pro mode. So that one is still going to be running at 30 FPS. So what is the freaking use of getting a PS5 Pro? Like, honestly, I don't see no freaking use.
Balance and favor performance. Again, the performance-based mode is the way to go since it hits a stable 60 FPS while in some respects looking even better than the base PS5's graphics priority mode. You get finer detail and foliage, better lighting, and a better resolution rendering technique. Especially for a game like Horizon, those extra frames make the gameplay experience so much better, and you can still enjoy the lush vistas with that added clarity. The PS5 Pro's graphics priority option, on the other hand, caps Horizon Forbidden West at 30 FPS, but pushes.
So you see, there's like a minor differences when it comes to like the sharpness because you're playing on like the performance mode. The Performance Pro mode on the PS5 Pro
resolution. Yet, I don't find the trade-off worth it since it's tough to distinguish with the fantastic Pro Performance mode. The curious part is the balanced option, which goes for 40 FPS and strikes a middle ground with visual quality, but honestly, it's not worth the 30% cut in frame rate for marginal visual gains. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered takes a different angle as well. It oddly retains the same exact two options available from the base PS5, graphics or performance priority. But there's a new Pro option that uses PSSR to take 1440p resolution to output 4K while retaining other visual qualities of the PS5's graphics mode and still hitting a consistent 60 FPS. It was already a visually impressive remaster on PS5, but the boost in performance while having all of its graphical details sing is nice. Of all the games that have gotten PS5 Pro updates ahead of launch, Alan Wake 2 is certainly the most interesting one. Remedy decided to go all in on ray tracing with its graphics mode, and it's absolutely stunning, with robust reflections and lighting giving its world a much more striking look, especially in the way that feeds into its atmosphere. The Pro enhancements stretch the
So this is like the graphics mode and this is like the pro quality mode. It's kind of identical, to be honest. It's kind of identical, but at the same time, there is still some sort of ray tracing that's missing on the pro version if you take a close look at it.
The limits of what PSSR is capable of, however. In graphics mode, it uses a base resolution of 1224p and runs at 30 FPS to make room for all those sweet ray tracing techniques. You won't get those big ray traced features in performance mode, but it will target 60 FPS with an image quality akin to the graphics mode on the base PS5.
Hey, there we go. That's what I was saying. So you're not still going to get like the best looking game, but still it's going to run at 60 FPS with like good textures. It's all about textures. That's it. You're just cranking up the texture quality. Basically, if you're a PC gamer, you know what I mean. So there are like different options where you can crank up, or maybe not like high to ultra, maybe like medium to high, right? So medium to high quality for the textures is the only thing that's going to make like a difference with the PS5 Pro version. But apart from that, there's literally nothing that's really worth it in order to get the PS5 Pro. Really
shows
not.
A noticeable improvement over what you get from the base PS5, even if there are still compromises to be made.
Exactly. Oh, this looks good.
Now, when there's a new powerful console, there's always a racing game to flex the hardware. Taking speedy race cars down the track in F124 provides a pretty clear example of what ray tracing can do. When looking at the Pro Enhanced Quality mode and the base PS5's Quality mode, it's easy to pick up on the improvements in reflections and lighting, especially on rain-soaked tracks, and the Pro is able to do this by using PSSR to still target 60 FPS. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an example of where the PS5 Pro can bring a game out of the depths of weak technical performance to a much more playable state. By using PSSR, the Pro is able to put out noticeably higher and more consistent frame rates than the base console can, whether you choose to prioritize performance or graphics, which enables ray tracing too. Though it's not without noticeable drops in busy areas. It's a powerful console, but it's not magic.
So there is still going to be drops in frame rates. Like, even though it's a powerful console, there is still going to be drops in the frame rates. I honestly don't know how that's worth it, $700. As long as, you know, it's going to outperform with GTA 6. The only thing that I'm gonna, you know, care about when it comes to buying the PS5 Pro in this generation, I don't think it's nearly even competent to what we compare the PS4 and PS4 Pro. There is like a lot of difference between those consoles, okay? So there is a lot of difference, that Sony actually made it worth it to go ahead and purchase the PS4 Pro. But right now with PS5 Pro, it's all just gimmicks, man. It doesn't really make the console really worth it. So the only word that it's gonna make me purchase this console is for what I'm gonna be seeing with the GTA 6 comparison of the base PS5 and PS5 Pro. That's the only thing that's going to make me want to buy this console.
An example of how a game without Pro enhancements, or at least an uncapped frame rate option to just let the extra power work, isn't going to benefit in a tangible way without an update, since it's bound by the limitations that were built for its graphics modes. It's still capped at 30 FPS when prioritizing graphics, while the performance mode still targets 60 FPS with lesser visual quality.
It's still going to be playing at 30 FPS if you want like the highest visuals. For Dragon's Dogma too, by the way. That's bad. Is it worth it?
That's a lot of technical information, but it's on you. As someone who used to be a sucker for upgrading to new generations of high-end graphics cards to push my PC to its limits, the PS5 Pro scratches that old itch because I do notice and appreciate the differences it provides. The visual quality that the Pro enhanced performance modes have thus far look fantastic, and it's all the more enticing because hitting 60 FPS gives a smooth gameplay experience that's tough to come back from. I've also found performance modes on the base PS5 to be lackluster in some cases, and since the Pro has shown the potential in addressing that shortcoming, I find that the new console can be a worthy investment. There are a few games out there now that make the Pro a more enticing prospect. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's performance mode on base PS5 feels too compromising to me, with in-engine cutscenes and close-ups on characters during pivotal moments looking muddled at 60 FPS. Thus, I bit
So basically, I don't think it's worth it. So that's just my honest opinion, right? As far as what we have seen, IGN has done their official review, and I've got to say, man, it's really not that worth it if you're even thinking about getting this console. Let me know in the comments down below. Is like improving a slight, visuals when it comes to fidelity, in terms of like increasing the texture quality. That's the only difference you're going to be seeing, texture quality, whereas you're going to be sacrificing ray tracing in order to get the 60 FPS. So let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts, opinions? Are you guys going to be getting PS5 Pro, or if you have already gotten the console? My decision, I'm still going to be waiting until GTA 6 gets announced, and I want to see what kind of difference PS5 Pro is going to be making with GTA 6. And at the same time, I'm also looking forward to seeing what Microsoft is going to be doing in order to outcompete the PS5 Pro, because I've heard rumors, okay, it's not official, rumors that Microsoft is indeed working on Xbox 2. That's like the new latest next-gen console, Xbox 2. So I'm interested to see what's going to be coming up for that console, and whatever is happening, man, they're doing great with Game Pass. There are some incredible games that's being added to Game Pass on day one. So this is already like a good purchase in my opinion. So I'm just going to wait and watch whichever console is going to be the best in order to play GTA 6. That's what I'm going to pick, because that's the only game that matters for me when it comes to visuals. Other than that, I think every other game is pretty much the same, man. It's not much big of a difference. So let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you guys on tomorrow's video. Until then, if you guys did enjoy this video, drop a like. It really means a lot. It helps the channel a lot more than you guys think. Subscribe for more, and we will definitely be best friends forever. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you guys on tomorrow's video. Until then, take it easy, fams, and goodbye.